All right. I'd like to call this Assembly Rules Committee meeting of the whole to order. We're noticed today from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Felix Rivera,
Present.
John Weddleton,
Here.
Jamie Allard,
Here.
Christopher Constant,
Here.
Felix Dunbar. Oh, sorry.
That's a new one.
Mr. Dunbar Forrest will be here at 11 o'clock, so he's excused till 11.
You can't
Oh,
make this
Kennedy.
stuff up.
Crystal is excused.
Suzanne LaFrance,
Here.
Cameron Perez Verdia,
Cameron is excused.
Pete Peterson,
Present.
Meg Zalatel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. As usual, if folks want to get in the queue, please put yourself in the chat, or if you can't access the chat, text me, and if you're in the room, just flag me down and I'll add you into the queue. As we've already seen, Rules Committee meetings are informal, so feel free to keep being informal. Although we should use each other's correct names. All right, so let's go ahead and start going through the agenda. So, under new business, first item we have is report from the Assembly Chair and Municipal Clerk. I'll go first. And I guess just generally, I want to welcome everyone to our hybrid committee meeting in person or virtually. A big thanks to the clerk's office for helping make this happen, especially in the middle of yet another election. So much appreciated. So I don't have too much to update the members on due to the election and the increased stress on the clerk's office. Some of the work we have has been temporarily put on hold. But a few things to update on, though. First is the Assembly office remodel. So now that the remodel is done for the Anchorage offices, we are moving forward with furnishing the offices and getting them ready for a grand opening of sorts. From what I understand, we should be ready to move into the Anchorage offices in June. Again, 2 of the offices are mostly furnished and can be used for work or meetings, but just know that the suite is still in progress. So it's a little messy in there if you bring folks in for meetings. As I understand it, the Chugiak Eagle River offices are also moving forward and is in the process of wrapping up the design phase. So I'm hopeful that these offices will be done around June as well. Next is the Native Village of Eklutna and Municipality of Anchorage meeting. Assembly leadership is still working with the Native Village of Eklutna to come up with the agenda for our first government-to-government meeting, which is set for May 27th. So you should hopefully hear more from us on that in the coming week. Assembly aides, as members know, our last aide brought on to assist with COVID-19 relief, Marissa Pimenta, is ending her contract today. A big thanks to all of the work Marissa did to help us get off the ground with our communications and organizing effort for usage of the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds. New Assembly positions. Next week, I will begin the process of working with Assembly leadership to include the clerk's office to fill the 2 new positions approved for the legislative branch, the Assistant Assembly Counsel and Special Assistant to the Assembly. As a reminder, both of these positions per our budget can begin no earlier than July 1st. I'll be using the same process we use to fill our Assembly aide positions to assist with COVID-19 efforts, and we'll keep the body in the loop as we go through the hiring process. ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act funds. So now that the state has released its plan for ARPA funding, which is working through the legislative process, and the federal programs are beginning to roll out, I will be looking at restarting our own process to determine the best usage of ARPA funds. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like at the moment, but look for some draft ideas from me next week. As a reminder, we still haven't received some critical bits of information we're waiting for, including exactly how much money we are getting, additional federal guidance, and of course, the money isn't in our bank account yet. Redistricting. Some members may have noticed a work session planned on June 25th regarding redistricting. The staff for the Alaska Redistricting Board is doing presentations all around the state for local governments to outline the basics of the redistricting process. It should be a pretty good primer for us as we look at beginning our local redistricting process sometime possibly later this year, which will have an added layer of complexity as we look at expanding District 1 to allow for 2 members to represent that district. Anything else members would like me to report on, or any questions? Just looking at the queue right now. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone in the chat, so we'll go ahead and move on to Barbara for the Municipal Clerk Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I always report on 3 things, or try to report on 3 things. So I thought I would tell you this today. Number 1, the jobs in the clerk's office and the assembly branch for the staff are really very interesting jobs because we always are learning something new. And like our Teams Live and our little technical glitch, or Board of Adjustment hearings and cases, and Mandy is working on quasi-judicial. We're always all learning something new. The second thing I'd like to tell you is that we're here to solve problems. So we had a little chuckle today because you have a special meeting on Monday, and of course we scheduled it in the chambers, found out the Planning and Zoning Commission had a really important meeting, so we tried to schedule it in the Wilder Marston, but we have voting going on there. So we ended up, we're going to reschedule it in the 4th floor library learning commons. So we're here to solve problems. No, date and time are exactly the same. It's Monday, May 3rd at 6:00 p.m. in the Lusac Library, 4th floor, learning commons, and we'll have lots of signage here. Another problem solving that we're going to do. And then the third thing I'll tell you, of course, is elections. We are really managing like 3 to 4 elections right now because we're still finishing up with the April 6th election. We have letters that need to go to all of the voters whose ballots were rejected by the commission. That has to be done within 30 days. Excuse me. We're working on that. We have the 2 recounts that we need to go to the commission on and get certified with the assembly, and we'll have a detailed report for you, and that'll be an opportunity to discuss that process. And then, of course, we're doing a runoff election. The runoff is May 11th. We want to make sure that everybody knows we have 2 vote centers opening on Monday. Those are some extra hours. The City Hall Vote Center opens on Wednesday. Of course, they're open until 6 p.m. on the weekdays. They all have hours, not this coming weekend, but the following weekend before the election. On Election Day, we're open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the drop boxes are open. They opened on April 21st, so return your ballots in the drop box, by mail, or at one of the vote centers when they open next week. And that's it from me.
Great. Thanks so much, Barbara. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on our agenda to our next item, Assembly Priorities. So I just wanted to go through our last 2 priorities today. As members know, every month during this meeting, I try to go through a couple of them and see if members have any thoughts on the short and long-term goals outlined in these priorities. And then this will probably be the last time that I go through these priorities. Probably in future meetings, we'll focus instead on sort of the new version of our priorities and how we want to move forward with that, which we've already began that discussion in a prior Rules Committee meeting. Okay, so first we have the quality of life priorities. I'm just going to pull up our newsletter and just walk through the update from our last newsletter, which was January. So I might be a little bit aged. Okay, so as a reminder, here are the short-term goals. So align for quality of life, align and staff municipal boards and commissions to focus on quality of life issues, create overarching commission on quality of life, which would provide guidance to assembly and municipality, focus on community safety and health. Long-term goals include increased public transit and multimodal options to include South Anchorage and Eagle River, increase amenities identified as key factors in quality of life, parks, trails, art, etc. All of these short and long-term goals are noted as in progress. Is there any discussion or thoughts on any of those short or long-term goals?
Felix, this is Christopher.
Yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead,
have
Chris.
anything really on these, although quality of life and economic development might fit. I just want to reiterate, and I know it's a broken record, but that we should be adding a plank for equity.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Chris. That is definitely top of mind as we look at sort of the next iteration or updating any of these. Okay, so then moving on to economic development. So I'll go ahead and read out these short and long terms. So first is short-term goals, focus, appropriate and limited website revamp resources on business and development frequently used sites, explore barriers to economic well-being of small and large businesses. So for short-term goals, that first one is marked as completed, second one as in progress. Long-term goals, convene discussions surrounding roadblocks to development and implement suggestions, total revamp of website and move to e-services. So first one is marked as a not started. Second one is marked as not started, but in fact, we do know since January that that is actually in progress. And the OIT is working on a total revamp of the website to be done, I think, sometime in June or later this summer. So any discussion on the short and long-term goals under economic development?
Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Oh, and I think we're looking at assembly activities here more than broadly in the city. Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess the short answer is, so all of these goals were items that we, the assembly, thought that we could convene or help on, but understood that we, the assembly, aren't the only player in any of these areas.
Yeah, I think looking back over the last year or two, we've done a whole lot of things that have helped. We've done, once the land use plan was done and it identified certain areas to encourage levels of housing, and we've done the ordinances to allow tax breaks for putting houses downtown and then along transit corridors and so on. And we're starting to see some changes there. Oh, am I close enough? Okay. Is that better? Okay. Anyway, so I'm just kind of making a recap of some of the things we've done. And then, when we did the building code, I think changes that we made to that ordinance as it came to us was pretty sensitive to, cost of building. And then Forrest and I are working on a couple of things that we'll see soon at the Community Economic Development Committee next Thursday. We'll have, the small thing about curbs and gutters and different designs. And they're, part of a series of things that have just taken little things that have been tripping up the home builders and developers and making it a little bit easier for them. So there's been like steady progress on these things, not necessarily huge dramatic things, but it's been very persistent. So I think we've been kind of fulfilling that goal. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that, John. Looks like the newsletter could use some updating. Chris?
Yeah, John, since you brought up the proposal for the curbs, I just want to let you all know that I have an amendment that I haven't started drafting, but it's going to come forward that would not allow roll curbs in the kind of old neighborhoods that have alley access. I had discussions with the folks who are working with you on this, and the one problem is if you start to get the rollover curbs because you're trying to save curb cuts, you leave certain neighborhoods with a kind of negative impact, and all of the utility work is actually done on the backside without any impact to the curb, so there wouldn't be need for curb cuts anyhow. So that's a conversation you'll be hearing from me about here pretty soon.
Sure. So back to you, John, and then Meg.
Okay, yeah, I look forward to that, Chris. You know, I think we had a fairly rudimentary proposal, and then your ideas are certainly valid. And the administration, Chris Schutte had said that he's developed a matrix of ways to deal with it. So I look forward to that. And vertical curbs have a benefit. You know, people don't park on the sidewalk so much, and that's important to me and other people. So we want to definitely bracket this to just where it's needed. Thanks.
Thanks, Meg.
Thanks. So there's two things I wanted to toss out here, I think, that fit with our economic short-term and long-term goals, and somewhat with what John has already mentioned, is I would like to do some exploration of expansion of the residential tax credit for other parts of town. We do have it in downtown as a building incentive, but I think there are other places that could apply. And then the other, and I think we've started this conversation a little bit, is the use of tax, like the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, how we can possibly use that mechanism in other parts of town as well, to spur economic development. I think we saw the advantage of that district during COVID, really, championing downtown. And we know Midtown is exploring it, but really starting to have those conversations throughout different parts of town, and the entire municipality to figure out if there's some policy that we should be looking at to guide further development of those. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. All right, any other discussion on assembly priorities before we move on? All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Next item on our agenda, to assembly member discussion on pending business and update from committee's upcoming business. So again, this is an opportunity. I'm going to start in alpha order as I see on the participant list, and this is an opportunity for you to bring up any individual business that you have that might be coming before the body, or any committee work that you have that might be coming before your committee. So I'm going to start with Jamie.
All right, hold on. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Felix. So I've requested a audit through a third-party audit. I'm working with Ms. LaFrance to go through the audit committee in regards to the CAFA and the tax cap. It appears that we haven't had an audit since 2016, and I have my notes. Let me pull up my notes. What it will take is an amendment to the BDO contract, and in that amendment, it will cost a little bit of money, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that the primary purpose of the annual audit is not to find errors, omissions in the financial dealings of the municipality. Rather, it's to assure all residents, city officials, creditors, bond houses, and other interested in financial records, the municipality, that the items under the audit have been prepared with due care, diligence, and are in accordance with appropriate financial standards. I believe this is an opportunity for us to be completely transparent with the community as needed, and I would ask for your support when this comes in front of the body. As far as anything else that I am working on or have any comments, not at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Jamie, thanks. I think your goals are certainly shared by everyone, but I'm curious. I mean, the Kafir is the audited document that BDO or whoever it's been over the course of many years. Isn't that already done?
From what can I respond, Chair, or is this directed to me, John?
Go ahead, Jamie.
Okay, thank you. John, at this time. Oops. Oh, hold on a minute. Sorry. My kid did her Bluetooth. At this time, from what I understand, I'm sorry, it's real world issues here. But at this time, John, I am not aware of any audit, third party audit that has been done since 2016. If that's your question. In regards to the tax cap.
Thanks. Yeah, it looks like that answered John's question. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. Is this, when you say an outside audit or third-party audit with BDO, are you suggesting another party from BDO, because BDO does do our audits, or are you just suggesting that the capper and the tax cap are audited by our external auditors?
Chair, can I respond? Go ahead,
Jamie.
Chris, so what it is that we could do an internal audit. That would mean by our Mr. Chatty, or we could do it by the BDO. I'm just requesting we go through the third-party BDO and that just your guys' support, because it's going to change the contract and it's going to cost additional funds.
Great. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't another auditor outside our regular third-party auditor. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Suzanne?
Thank you, Felix. I just wanted to add that we are scheduling a meeting for the audit committee, and we're looking at mid to late May and are working with the clerk's office on that. So thank you.
Thanks. Meg?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll be interested to learn more about the cost of the audit and where those funds will come from, because I'm not sure how much the audit will cost and the funding source. So, I can tune into the audit committee if this is on the agenda, but I would really love for that to be addressed.
Thanks. All right. Thanks so much, Jamie. We're going to go ahead and move
on next. Chair, I apologize. Can I just add one more thing? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. And to address Ms. Salatel, absolutely, it will cost funds, and I'm working with the BDO to find out how much that they would be requesting for that. But I'd also like to chime in and saying this could save the municipality millions of dollars by doing this audit, and it could put us in a better direction as far as how we could save additional funds in the future on taxes. Thank you, Chair. I'm done.
Thanks. All right. So next I have on the list, Chris.
Currently, I actually don't have anything I'm working on outside of the shelter licensing project, which you are all aware of, and closely watching the election just so we can get through the process and be prepared for the conversation in the summer and fall about Title 28 revisions, but I have nothing specific at this time to report, although I may remember something after you all are done reporting. Thank you.
Thanks. Next I have Suzanne.
Thanks, Felix. Actually, right now, some of us are focused on addressing the tax levy and mill rate issue that's impacting residents outside of the police and fire service areas, especially Girdwood and folks along Turnagain Arm. Though Megan, John, and I are still doing some work on the procurement AO based on some of the comments that were received from other members at the work session. Thanks. That's it for now.
Thanks, Suzanne. Pete?
Thanks, Felix. I'm following what's going on in Juneau, getting updates regularly from AML, and they're probably going to be there for, looks like, another month, give or take a little bit. And who knows whether there'll be special sessions again or not. And obviously some budget negotiations are still ongoing down there, which could have effects on us. And so we're just sort of in the observing mode right now. And then the Ethics and Election Committee will be taking up revisions to Title 28 probably sometime this summer, June, July area, maybe later. That's it. Thanks.
Got it. Thanks, Pete. Meg?
Yes, so I have on my plate a few things, shelter licensing, which you're all well aware of. Additionally, I've been doing some work and would welcome anybody who's interested in looking at incentives to increase the utilization of curbside recycling and composting, both at a residential and a commercial level. Been working closely with Solid Waste Services there. And then in terms of the Committee on Housing and Homelessness, I would like to invite you all to, if you know of providers doing this work in our community that maybe aren't on our radar, both in terms of transitional housing, job, skills training, or have interesting and innovative affordable housing ideas, please send them my way. I'm trying to keep our meetings well balanced so that we're not just talking about homelessness, but we're talking about the continuum of services and all the issues that go into housing and homelessness. I have been able to make some contact with a few new providers that I'll have highlighted at next month's meeting. And then finally, I'm working with the Black Chamber of Commerce in particular on ARPA proposals, so those can come through to us. There was some concern that the outreach wasn't rounded enough, so I would just use this as an opportunity to have us all think about, you know, who we have a lot of proposals, you know, a lot have been emailed, but who's not in the room yet or who hasn't put anything forward that maybe you're aware of, or if there's a, you know, a segment of the community missing, because I think that's really important, and I'm happy to help and assist with that in any way. I think that's everything. That's everything that's top of mind, at least at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. John?
No, thanks. You know, I made a big list here, so maybe I'm overreaching, but you know, for the Community Economic Development Committee, we've made a lot of progress on the marijuana rule changes, and I think one more meeting to kind of cap some things off, and then we'll get an ordinance heading our way. And then we'll get back to the easements and right-of-way issue and just, you know, continue looking at what the city does about you know, times where we've kind of neglected those. And I know Chris Constant to be extremely hardworking, but he only listed one thing he's working on, so I'm going to give him this one. There's also the shelter licensing, which is a challenging one, and Megan and Chris have really done most of the work on there, but I'm hanging on too. Long-range transportation plan, which we've talked about some, that we'll continue on. The I think Mandy or someone mentioned quasi-judicial process, which we started 2 years ago. We got very, very far, probably 98% of the way there, and then came COVID, and it just wasn't a priority. But it is important for us to do things like you know, rezones and you know, marijuana and alcohol licenses in a way that's a little more appropriate than what we've been doing. So we have a plan almost ready, and I think we'll get back on that. The couple other things coming out, you know, I think we all hear about people questioning how properties are assessed and people going to get kind of to challenge their assessments, and they get very frustrated that the process isn't very transparent. You know, how do we do it? People think, you know, you get your, when you sell your house, you go get an appraisal, and that seems very natural to us, but the way our homes are assessed is very, very different, and it's just not really clear enough to people. And when there's a question that's it's hard for people to get a satisfactory answer. So I think there needs to be a lot more transparency there. And then the system for appeals is really less focused on, gosh, they got the wrong number, you know, this person's correct, it shouldn't be that high. It's, was the process done properly? And when you really don't know what that process is clearly, it's hard for the public to challenge an assessment. So that there's something needs to be done there, and this isn't to disparage the people doing the work at the assessor's office. I think they do good work, focus on the routines, and they do a great job getting out to community councils, I know, and doing good presentations, but something's not quite matching up, and we need to look into that. And that could be a very long, challenging process. We did a few years ago secure trash regulation zones, and we set up Girdwood as a regulation zone and Clutna, and that's where they're required to have, bear carts that are, so that the bears don't come in and eat all the trash. Unfortunately, the clever bears in Girdwood have figured out how to overcome those fairly easily. So they've requested some changes in that regulation, and it is, so those are in the works. So I'll have something fairly soon, though it becomes more challenging for the trash haulers to get, it's hard. The bears are smart, and it's hard to get a trash cart that works well, and they're very, very expensive for the trash haulers. So to try to balance smart bears and expense is going to be a tough one on this. And then another one is the Community Council for Girdwood. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors does an amazing job representing the interests of the area, but it's not really a community council, and it doesn't represent the whole area, which would include, Crow Creek, and then I think even some ways down to Portage. So there's been an ongoing discussion, and Daryl Hess, the ombudsman, this is sort of it's on his list of things to do, is to get a true community council there instead of, I think, the Land Use Committee for Girdwood Board of Supervisors acts as a community council, and it's not quite a perfect match. Anyway, that's a short list. Thanks.
Thanks, John. All right. And then for me, I don't really have anything to add at this time in terms of individual priorities, and you all know the things going on for me as chair. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and move on to the last item on our agenda, which is other items. We'll go ahead and start with COVID-19. So just like in prior months' meetings, I wanted to create space to have an open discussion about any issues which have come up regarding COVID-19 that folks want the Assembly to engage in, either through committee process or work sessions or other forums. I don't have any items to kick this off, and I'll open it up to any of the members.
Felix, this is Pete.
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Thanks. Someone asked me a question the other day. Do we have any idea how many of the high school students are getting vaccinated? Do we have a percentage on that at all? Because probably 2/3 of the kids in high school are 16 or over, I would imagine, or somewhere in that vicinity. And just someone asked me that, and I had no idea what the answer to that might be. If anybody had that kind of information, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks. I myself don't know that information, and I honestly don't think ASD would put that information out, but I'll open it up to see if anyone else knows the answer. I'm not seeing anyone. So I guess just generally, is there any other discussion on COVID-19? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Just for if there's public listening besides Eugene Haberman here, we could probably discuss. I know we could discuss for a day COVID-19, and we do it virtually every regular Tuesday meeting. So don't think that lack of long discussion on this means it's not important at all. It's been obviously the issue for over a year. But it is also good news that we are heading away from it, and that's exciting to all of us. I think starting next week is vaccination week or month or something, and there's all kinds of regular sites around town. There's pop-ups all over town. I know helping organize one in North Spenard that will have special Spenard stickers for you when you get your shot, and special discounts and prizes and stuff from the businesses in the area. So look forward to that.
Thanks, John. And yeah, I guess just to reiterate, this is a space that I have been creating in this committee meeting for several months now, where I open it up to any members if they want to talk about anything COVID-19 related, so that I can just ensure that any of our issues are being addressed either in committee, work session, or other process. So yeah, thanks, John. Meg?
Thanks. That was a good reminder that the Health Policy Committee will be taking up the transition planning. We, like Public Safety Committee, have bumped our meeting from the 5th of May to the 12th of May, but then we will touch on the variety of transition issues, particularly how the vaccine and testing transition is going into the health department, contracts and logistics in the Office of Emergency Management, and mass care into the development services offices. If there are questions you have that you would like addressed during that briefing, you can either send it to those departments, or if you send it through the clerk's office, we'll make sure to get those passed on to the appropriate presenter who will be at the meeting, because we really want these to be briefings that are tailored to us and the information we need to know. And we should have, I believe, 2 biweekly reports on the transition by that point, so we'll be able to do any follow-up questions then as well. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Meg. All right, I'm not seeing anything else, so go ahead and move us on to the next topic under other items, anti-racism equity work. So now that the Chief Equity Officer has come on board, I believe we can start intentionally working on some of the areas of work that I know members have expressed interest in with regards to anti-racism and equity work. I'm looking at kicking this discussion off, and specifically that discussion being of how the Assembly wants to work with the Chief Equity Officer at an already scheduled Special Rules Committee meeting on May 7th. Right now, the only topic on that agenda is to have a discussion with Senator Gray Jackson regarding the old Legislative Services Office, which was a request that came out of this committee in a prior meeting. Early next week, you should be getting an agenda for the May 7th meeting, so you'll know if this topic is on that agenda or not. If not, I'll be scheduling a separate meeting as soon as possible to begin this discussion, because I know it's one that many of us are itching to have. Any discussion on that before I move on? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Thanks. Since we kind of approved the appointment of a Chief Equity Officer a couple days ago, I think we've all gotten some emails and comments, and I think there's a buzz on talk radio and so on about this. And a lot of it is that we've heard is, I don't think all of it is, the thought out there is that it's negative at all, but I mean, what we're hearing is, and I think the way it's posited is that it's an extreme, and we're going to see really extreme things. And I don't know if that's the case, because we've seen, where last summer, there are huge, violent, dangerous protests down Lower 48. We didn't see that here because we're not in such a bad place. But between doing nothing and the book White Fragility, there's a huge range of things to look at and to do. And I think when it's posited that what we have a Chief Equity Officer who would create the world envisioned by White Fragility and similar books, it's not really the case. I mean, that just kind of brackets the discussion. But there is something going on. When I hear Meg saying she's gone to the Black Chamber of Commerce, I go, what the heck is there a Black Chamber of Commerce for? We don't need that many, really. There must be a reason. And it's that kind of thing. It's like, why would they make their own Chamber of Commerce and not join with the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce? And it's that kind of thing that we should look at and see what's missing and why does that happen. So at any rate, so I look forward to the discussions. I think my talk with the new Chief Equity Officer was really good, and he's opened a lot of ideas, has experience, and I look forward to seeing what he kind of discerns for Anchorage over the months. Thanks.
Thanks. Chris?
Yeah, sorry if there's a bunch of background noise. I have contractor here right now, but so on that topic, I think that we should avail ourselves of the opportunity, if he's willing, to have a conversation with Chief McCoy and his experience on this topic in relationship to policing and in relationship to the future. So the Chief Equity Officer is great, and we have Chief McCoy that I think it would be wise to engage with if he has the time and is willing.
Thanks, Chris. Meg?
Thanks. I had already shared this idea with the chair, but I do want to just toss it out there. I've been thinking about what the role of the Chief Equity Officer may be in terms of committees and how we can make sure the office the Chief Equity Office work is integrated with our work, and a lot of our work happens at the committee level, whether that's some kind of standing time with that individual on a quarterly basis or at an as-needed basis. But I would invite those who, I would invite all of you to think about how that work would, or how we could integrate that person and that work into our committees a little bit more directly, and not simply stand this work up in parallel, but be more integrative, I guess, in our approach. Thanks.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, so if Cameron were here, he would probably have a comment to chime in. So I'm just gonna bring out my inner Cameron. So Cameron is working through the Public Safety Committee to do something just like what Meg was suggesting, which was bringing the Chief Equity Officer in to work collaboratively with Chief McCoy with regards to the body-worn camera policy issue, and especially with regards to engaging the broader community on the topic, the two of them working collaboratively. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think we'll see that naturally occurring, but I also think it's good to talk about how we can institutionalize that as well.
I would just offer, I think we just heard from Felix Dunbar-Verdia.
Thanks. All right, seeing no one else in the queue, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is possible naming panel requested by SWS. So I just wanted to notify this body in this setting that SWS has requested a naming panel for the currently under construction new central transfer station. They want to name it after a former SWS employee who passed away in 2019. I think it's an absolutely honorable request on behalf of the department, but I also know that this body has had concerns about our overarching naming panel process. Not specifically about any one naming panel request, but about the overarching process. So I just wanted to bring this topic up here early on in the process, before the naming panel is even created, to hear any thoughts from the members. And my goal is, after hearing thoughts from the members, if you have any today, to move forward with SWS's request and bring forward a resolution creating the naming panel, hopefully second meeting of May is my goal. So I'll open it up if there are any discussion from the members. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I haven't seen that, but I know there's been some requests to name part of the Central Transfer Station after Tom Bishel, who people might know as the owner of Second Chance, but he had quite a history in Alaska from the early days. He was politically active. He ran a boarding house that Ted Stevens used to room at, and our early legislators and representatives of Congress pre-statehood, and really was a remarkable guy. And he was all about, reduce, reuse, recycle before it was a buzzword. And but there's some desire to see a drop-off, location on the site there that would be named after him, and is really in the spirit of what he was living, for many of his years. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. And Cameron has consistently mentioned a conversation about, kind of making sure we have an approach that addresses the long-term kind of history of the land. And I want us to contemplate, probably sooner than later, pick this up and allow ourselves the space to have multiple names, dual names for facilities and places and portions of buildings and public lands. In so doing, we should always, as has been suggested, contemplate if there is an original Dena'ina place name or one that isn't original but might be fitting. But at the same time, we should leave room for honoring and recognizing individuals who have made significant contributions and are identified by constituencies in their community and our community as a whole. And so I want us to try to figure out how to square the challenge by having room for both, as opposed to finding ourselves telling people, no, we don't want to do this because you aren't this or you aren't that. So that's, for my 2 cents, I want to make sure we're remaining open to the opportunity for all members of the community.
Thanks, Chris. That's an interesting idea. Want to note for the record, we've been joined by Forrest Dunbar, or as noted earlier, Felix Dunbar. All right. So hearing no other discussion on this, great. So like I said, I will bring forward a resolution that will have, that creates the naming panel to do as SWS suggested. So if you have any additional thoughts, please reach out to me. Okay, next is the B3 zone change and shelter licensing town hall / other public process. So at the request of Meg, I added this to our agenda. I think we are likely at a point where we can begin thinking about and planning town halls or other public processes we want to undertake as the B3 zone change and shelter licensing gets closer to coming before this body in June. From my perspective, I think it's critical that we have this dialogue and look forward to hearing thoughts from the members. Go ahead, start with Meg.
Great, thank you. I was actually going to be really concrete about this, as I tend to be, and start looking, suggesting a date, frankly, looking at kind of what we've talked about in terms of timing. It is the goal of the sponsors of the shelter licensing to have that item introduced by May 25th, so that the first public hearing would be around June 8th. So that leaves an intervening week in between, a Tuesday. I know you all probably love your Tuesday nights off, but it would be very relevant to have the town hall, I think, then the public hearing, and then and possibly the opportunity to take that feedback from the town hall and even look at potential amendments and an S version in advance of the public hearing. I can also see that this might be a multiple public hearing set of items, but to me that feels like the right timing. And I think it will also help in terms of solidifying firm dates for, I think we've seen a lot of community councils take some of these issues up, but on the licensing side, providers, coalition members, other interested parties knowing that this is a timeline we're moving through, so that it kind of provides some deadlines to start getting us that feedback. Thanks.
Thanks, Meg. So I'm next in the queue. So I guess a few things. First is, I like that idea of doing, so just looking at the calendar, it would be June 1, a June 1 town hall. I would also suggest that we should probably look at doing multiple town halls, not just one, because people might not be able to attend one date, but may be able to attend another date. It might be helpful for us to do maybe a weekday and a weekend or whatever we decide. Also, I think it might also be beneficial for us to logistically, I don't know how this might work, but push the public hearing for the first public hearing for these two ordinances, perhaps to the second meeting in June, just to give ourselves a little bit more time between the town hall and that first public hearing. But I could also see where it might work to keep that first public hearing so we can keep getting feedback and keep fine-tuning the ordinance as we go through the process. So interested to hear any thoughts on that. And then I guess the last thing is, it might be beneficial if there was some type of presentation that we could take to community councils on these two ordinances that has some pretty uniform sort of understanding, so that we can give our community councils, the basics of here's this and here's that. And of course, some of the members can embellish on top of that, the presentation. But I think that might be really helpful for us to have as we go around community councils in May and June. That's it for me. Chris?
Yeah, Felix, hold on. There we go. I think that we should tie the process to the first meeting in June, and because it may take us a number of days to get through the conversation on both ordinances. And so I can talk to you about this later from a planning and implementation perspective, but I'm going to push that we schedule the first of the hearings on that day in case we need to continue a number of times.
Thanks, Chris. Any other thoughts? I guess just so I typically like getting sort of a thumbs up from the body before I start working on planning town halls. So I guess just as a general, is there any opposition to moving forward with a June 1st town hall with potentially other opportunities coming on board? All right, hearing none, then I will go ahead start working with Assembly leadership and with the sponsors on getting that organized. Thanks for the thumbs up, Suzanne. Okay, so then next topic, last one under other items, Assembly Member 101 training. So at the last Rules Committee meeting, there was, I think, general interest in engaging in an Assembly 101 training, but I think the consensus was that it be a nonpartisan overview of the work of our positions and not include any political matters. I think that was a strong leaning from members who spoke at that time. So I think in order to ensure that these goals are achieved, I wanted to see who might be interested in participating in a working group to come up with the training materials. As an FYI, this isn't a project that I'm looking to get done by a specific timeline. I'm okay with this taking as long as it needs to get it right. So if there's anyone interested in being a part of that work group, please let me know. Or if you have any questions about this in general, I'll start with Meg.
Thanks, Felix. If there aren't a lot of volunteers, perhaps the communications subcommittee could take this up. I'm not volunteering. I'm just saying I'm happy to be part of Plan B. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm sure your other committee members appreciate that. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. I'm volunteering.
Thanks, Suzanne.
You know, I'm Felix. I'm separately from this idea, what you talked about there, like Assembly 101 for the public, Assembly 101 for us as well might be good. In particular, and I'm hopeful that we can get back to the practice we did a few years ago, but I know there's not a lot of time right now, staff-wise and labor-wise, but where we practice up on Robert's rules and kind of play around with it in a way that kind of makes us more able and capable of working through the process with, you know, because the more you practice when it's not up there, the better we are at being up there with it.
All right, I think Barbara's going to talk about that a little bit.
Through the chair, over the years, we've worked hard to save some of your basic training. You know, we have that training folder with Open Meetings Act, Robert's Rules, purchasing, budgeting, all of the 101s. They're all saved in a specific training folder. And when Austin Quinn Davidson was an assembly member, she led that group. We also have an assembly member orientation, and I think we could take those materials and recycle them into a 101 at a retreat or something. It would probably have to be in the fall, but if that's what the assembly would like, we could put that together.
Yeah, Barbara, thanks. And for my part, I just know we did some really fun activities with it, and it really helped people to grasp how the flow of the rules work, and it might be helpful. So thank you, Barbara, for your work.
Great. All right. Great. So I have Suzanne right now on the list, and then I'll reach out to a couple of the members. Again, I think it's important for me just to ensure that we're meeting the goal of a nonpartisan overview and not including any political matters, that we have a good group of folks working on this. So
Felix,
I'll
this
reach out.
is,
Oh, sorry, who's that?
sorry to interrupt. I'm trying to find how I get in the queue. I apologize. I would volunteer with Miss LaFrance.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Okay, so that's it on that topic, and I think that ends our business that we had on the agenda. So we'll go ahead and move on to audience participation. We'll start with folks on the phone. Then we will go to in person, and then we will go to the Q&A. So do we have anyone on the phone?
There is one number on the phone that ends in 2653. If you would like to speak, you are now unmuted.
If you'd like to speak, welcome. Please introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes. Okay, and just confirming, do we have anyone else?
That is it.
Okay, let's go ahead and move to in person. Welcome.
My name is Eugene Karl Haberman, 43-year Alaska resident, 20 of those years Anchorage resident, and currently a Valley resident. I'd like to remind you, when George Sullivan, the first mayor of the municipality of Anchorage, as mayor, it was Project 80s. Part of Project 80s was this facility we have here. I remember back where we used to be off of Tudor, it was packed there. People were very involved as far as public and elected officials. And the title of this room is the Assembly Chambers. That's what it is. It's Assembly Chambers. It allows for the public to be. But you're going to have a special meeting Monday. And the concept of moving the Assembly meeting into another location that is being directed now, and particularly in time of COVID, social distancing and all that, and in a very smaller location, is very regrettable, and I strongly encourage you to reconsider that direction. Also remind you is the idea of these meetings here, the committee meetings and so forth, is the idea of allowing for a video, audio, and papers and whatever, more connecting with the people, although few are here today. But the fact is, this is a much better program than what you had before in the small rooms. And also, I'm concerned is please do not go back to the scenario that back into the city hall rooms on the main floor and small rooms. Keep this as a place where you need your meetings and connect with the people, and not go backwards. And note also is that the scenario of what you have done in allowing this situation is the pre-COVID period was a situation where I attended those meetings, but unless you were in that room, you weren't able to witness what was going on presently at that time. And then there was no remote for connecting people as you do now, and which is much better. And there was a scenario that was very uncomfortable, and it really disconnected the people. But using this facility that you have here that was intended since day one when Lusac Library was built is the way to go. And you need to more focus on that and connect with the people in that direction. And I'm confused as exactly what's on the agenda for May 3rd. I see there's a reference announcement for today from 1 to 3 dealing with testing, inviting the Election Commission, but What about, when is the election commission going to be meeting? When is the, meeting, dealing with their review and the public meeting? Thank you very much and wish you all the best.
Thank you. So I had myself in the queue just to respond a little bit. Thanks, Mr. Haberman, for attending our meeting and for that comment. So just wanted to clarify that the meeting on Monday is going to be in the LUSAC library. So while it is not in the chambers, because there was a pre-planned planning and zoning commission meeting here, and they also share this space with us. We are doing it in the LUSAC library, and we're going to make sure that people know where to go, so that it's very apparent and transparent to the public. Also, that room upstairs, as I understand it, is fairly large, so there's going to be room for a great number of the public if they choose to attend that meeting on Monday. And then with regard to future plans, speaking to that, it is my intent for us to eventually move back to City Hall and do our committee meetings and work sessions back at City Hall. It is the place where we do our work, and looking to making upgrades in that space so that it is more accessible to members of the public, somewhat similar to the virtual accessibility that we have here. So I appreciate your comments, though. And John, it looked like you might. Okay, go ahead, John.
Thanks. So a couple thoughts is, one, I want to make sure that the meeting on Monday will have it so people can see us on TV and they can call it. So generally what we do here will be able to be done up there.
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, we do not have a camera upstairs. We were planning, we can do it Facebook Live so the public can see it. We're going to do our first test to use on-base remotely, but we won't be able to broadcast as far as I know. We can check that out, but I don't believe we're going to be able to broadcast on YouTube. So it'll be Facebook Live, and the public will be able to join us on the phone or watch on Facebook Live or be in person.
Okay, can I, another question on that, we've, the issue we'll be talking about is sort of a function of the odd service area system we have, and things dropped out, unfortunately, for places like Girdwood. So there's a lot of interest in Girdwood. Is it possible that they could meet at their community center where the Girdwood Board of Supervisors usually meets? They have a big monitor, and I guess they could load Facebook Live there. I mean, can they participate from there instead of driving into Anchorage?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, they could watch on Facebook Live, but there's no participation from the public through Facebook Live. The public would just be participating through the phone, just as you do in other meetings.
Yeah, I'm getting deja vu, like we had this discussion 12 months ago, but we'll continue it then. So if people were at the library, the community building there, watching it on Facebook Live, and used one phone and kind of queued up there to speak to us, would that work okay? And you could have Karl Kelly there to monitor it, or the Girdwood Board of Supervisors.
Through the chair, yes, Mr. Weddleton, that could work. We would have people sign up to testify from the Girdwood Community Center. They would do that online. They'd send that in. They could have a list of names. And then when we contact them, then we'd contact them to testify.
So they could just give the number for the phone at the community center then?
That would be correct. I can envision that.
Okay. I have no idea if they want to do this or not. It just occurred to me, and I will check. Thanks.
And I just want to be very clear before we send out expectations that none of the items, as I understand it, that we will be deliberating on have public hearings on them. So if I just want to make sure we're not telling people that they're going to get a chance to testify on the items we have before us. The only caveat there is if we as a body decided to change the order of the day to take up audience participation before we take up action, then there would be such an opportunity, but I don't want us to tell people that there will be until we've taken such action.
Well, maybe we can. I mean, because I would want to make that motion. People want to speak on this, and
yeah, and what I guess what I'm saying is you can tell people that, but I wouldn't guarantee until we have taken such action as a body.
All right, thanks.
Jamie?
Okay, there.
John,
I apologize for that. I have the same concerns as John because I know this directly impacts Chugiak. And so I would also like to ask if we're out of the municipality as far as miles wise. It's quite a distance for people in Chugiak. I think it's just about 25 miles. So what I'm looking at asking is, we have room 170 over at our town center. And then is there a possibility we could do the same for the community? I know my community is pretty upset about it. I've already reached out to the board of the Chugiak Volunteer Fire Department, and they are discussing things. And I would like to know if we could set up something similar where they could watch, and then if we do change the order of the day, they could too testify. I have a concern that we're moving it to be Facebook Live, and I don't believe every single person, especially the older, my husband doesn't even have social media for Facebook Live, and this is very concerning. I don't think that is how we should be deliberating, discussing, amending, working, voting on an issue if people have to go through Facebook Live versus the normal way that we do things. Does anybody have maybe Barbara has a input on this, please?
Through the chair, Ms. Allard, I think the way that it could work, similar to what Mr. Weddleton asked, we will have Facebook Live and we will have a phone set up, and people can sign up to testify via phone. And if they have one phone number with a variety of numbers, they can submit that. And then during the meeting, in final audience participation, wherever the body puts it, then the clerk staff can call that number and ask those people to speak.
And I think just sort of to add just a little bit, the gist of it is I will work with the clerk to make it all happen, because I understand both from Girdwood and Chugiak's perspectives that this is an important issue, and it's an important issue for, I think, all of us. So we will make sure that it is as accessible as possible to folks if we do remote rooms, as is being suggested.
Thank you, Felix.
Okay, Forrest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a hard out at 7 o'clock on Monday, something that's been scheduled for weeks, and I very much want to vote on this issue. But I'm curious about, is this a controversial thing, or is it something that we all agree is a mistake that we can quickly pass? And are we just introducing it on that night, or are we introducing and passing it on that night?
I'll speak to the last question. Hard for me to answer that first question. So on the last question, it is intent to introduce and pass whatever it is that we need to do on that night. I think, as I explained in the email that was sent out to the body, we're under a very strict deadline here. The property appraisal needs to get notices in the mail by May 15th. So we're under a deadline that's ticking down, and so Monday is our night for action. In terms of the first question of controversial, I certainly don't expect this to be controversial, right? I mean, this is a mistake, and we got to fix it. So I don't think we really have any choice here. So I hope that responds to your first question.
Well, my point is, and why I don't want us to change the order of the day, I want us to take it up and pass it quickly, is if it's something without public hearing attached to, if it's something we can pass in one night, then it's something without public hearing attached to it. It's either an emergency ordinance or a resolution. I assume it's an emergency ordinance. So my preference would be take it up and pass it and fix the mistake if we can agree between now and then that it's a mistake. Otherwise, I mean, people are going to testify, but they're going to be testifying to something that I hope we have sort of unanimous support for, if that makes sense. And so my preference would be to get written testimony beforehand, because it's an emergency ordinance, and then pass the thing, and then have our audience participation as we normally would. Yeah, otherwise we're delaying the passage of something that I hope that we all agree on, including the people who would be testifying. Or not testifying, participating, because there is no public testimony if it's something we can bring up and pass in one day.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's why I've emphasized that, it's going to be a decision of the body whether we decide to change the order of the day or not. And we'll make that decision at the meeting. Chris.
Yeah, thank you. And for similar reasons to what Mr. Dunbar just suggested, I just want folks to know that I'll strongly support the idea of let's take action as soon as we can, and then let the public testify on the action we took, as opposed to their fear that we wouldn't be taking the action that we're planning to take. And so for my part, I want us to fix the problem, and then we can take 2 hours of testimony about why we shouldn't have had this problem, or however it rolls. But then they'll actually know what we did and what we were intending.
Thanks. So Dean Gates made a comment in the chat, and I'll just read it. The setup described is compliant with the Open Meetings Act, as described by Ms. Jones. Thank you, Dean. John?
Thanks. We have an issue with the tax levy, but it would be incorrect to say it was an error. I don't know enough about it to know that it was an error. The math is the math. And what it really is a reflection on our system of service areas. We are not a united city. We are a conglomeration of service areas. And what happened is, generally area-wide functions have been covered by income from the bed tax and the, car rental tax and the new, the new fuel tax. And in fact, last year we saw there was a negative for that mill rate for area-wide. But this year, with the plummeting revenues due to COVID for those categories, those are not replacing property tax, because they, to the extent they were shorted. So those are covered by area-wide. So that, in combination with using, as Treasury recommended, some of the CARES Act funds to go towards public safety, created this odd balance. So it would really be wrong to say there was an error, but there is a problem, and that is this huge jump in area-wide. And there is more than one way to kind of change that situation. So we haven't seen what the administration proposes yet, and much of what I just said is somewhat speculative, just going back and looking at the mechanisms, and I haven't done the math on it to see exactly how it balances out. So, until we see the, fix, I don't want to use that word because it's not really a mistake, the change that comes from the administration, we can't really say that it's not controversial, because there's more than one way to go, and we have yet to see what their recommendation is, and then what recommendations might come from members. So I would like to hear from the public prior to making a decision. Thanks.
Thanks. Jamie?
Thank you, Chair. I understand the perspective of, let's get this out of the way and we can hear the community come in afterwards. But like John said, I don't know if this is an error either. And I'm going through numbers. I'm working with the team to say, hey, why did this happen and how did it happen? And the truth is that I want to listen to the community, because they do impact my vote. And to say I'm just going to vote for something without community involvement or hearing them, I don't think that's okay to do. So I would like to hear from the community before we go forward. There'll be experts down there testifying. Look, let's just be honest. The community found this mistake. We didn't. I think that their testimony is valuable, and I want to hear what my community has to say to determine how I vote and where I go on this. So I hope everybody could understand that. And John, I agree with you. So my direction is I would like to hear the community prior to voting, and that's what we should be doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. One thing I'd like to see is starting off with a PowerPoint from the administration, as they've done in other instances when there have been a number of community questions. I think that would be helpful. And I very much appreciate the desire to fix this quickly to address as John said, the odd balance that was created. And we've been in contact, John and I have, with numerous members of the community in the last couple days who've had questions and, expressed concern. And if there's, I too want to hear from people, and one way to address the issue of time could be to include as part of the debate some statements and feedback from leaders from the Girdwood Board of Supervisors or community council leaders in the impacted area. So that could be one way to go about it, but I would very much appreciate it if we could begin with a PowerPoint presentation from the administration providing those details as to how this happened. And I know they also have recommendations for how to change the process so that this kind of scenario doesn't happen again. Thanks, Felix.
Thanks, Suzanne. That request has been noted, and I'll talk with the administration about how we want to structure our time on Monday to make it as productive as possible for us and the public. Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, thanks, Mr. Haberman, for that, for instigating that discussion. John, did you have something else?
Yeah, before you adjourn, I see that there is a request from 100% of our audience to speak once again, and I hope we could allow that.
I wouldn't see it as speaking once again. I would see it as a follow-up, which sometimes we do allow. So I will go ahead and allow a brief follow-up.
Thank you, and it'll be very brief. Number one, the meeting you're talking about, the agenda for Monday doesn't, the notice of the Monday says time, date, and location. Location is wrong, but the fact is where's the agenda? Until me hearing what your responses have been, I'm still exactly not sure what the subject is. And also, respectfully, I heard the words in response, I guess, from some attorney Gates, that he's saying the words open meetings law. But I also deal with a separate law. It's not the open meetings law. State law says provide a reasonable opportunity for public to be heard. So if you're going to be making decisions, you need to connect with the people before you make the decisions. And they need to, if you're doing a work session, this whole thing is really unclear of what you're doing. It sounds like an urgency. And then also respectfully, in closing, yes, the Planning Commission's in this room, but you shouldn't be conflicting with having the same time as the Planning Commission, which is a lot of members of the community are concerned with what goes on in the Planning Commission, and have assembly meeting at the same time. And when you did in this room the certification of the election, it was the same night that the school board was meeting dealing with racism as one of the issues before them for public hearing. And that's all I have to say, but this is getting more confusing and more concerned on how you're really going to connect with the people on this. And thank you for the opportunity to respond.
Sorry, we're just taking a quick break so I can check something. So pause for a second, please. All right, so the clerk just showed me that the agenda is published. It was probably published earlier today, so you may have missed it.
I saw it before the meeting.
Please don't interrupt, Mr. Haberman. Please don't interrupt, Mr. Haberman. The agenda is published. The clerk has showed it to me, and it does have the correct location on it. So apologies if it was not published earlier, but it is now published. And I believe has the notice been updated as well? Okay, so the notice has also been updated as well. So I appreciate the concerns, and we'll make sure that this is as accessible to the public as possible. With that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to the Q&A. Is there anyone on the Q&A?
There was no questions or comments on the Q&A.
Okay, great. With that, then, seeing no one else in the queue, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. I think, as was noted in an email earlier in the week to the body, our planned work session that was at 2 o'clock has been canceled. You can see, please see that email for an explanation on that. With that, I will wish everyone a great weekend. This meeting is adjourned.